So what's going to happen to Matthew Perry's estate? My name is Andrew Ayers. I'm an estate planning and business law attorney with offices in New York City and Edina, Minnesota. And today we're going to look at the recent death of Chandler from Friends, Matthew Perry, and some lessons we can take for estate planning. So as you've probably read in the news, Matthew Perry, who played Chandler on Friends, the sitcom from the 90s on NBC, recently died. And upon his death, we found out that some of his friends and family have set up the Matthew Perry Foundation to help those suffering from addiction and who need help with recovery. Matthew Perry has had long struggles with addiction. His recent autobiography has shot to the top of the bestseller list for books as people really dig into his story and see all of the things he went through. But in the estate planning world, something I deal with on a daily basis, our next question is, what's going to happen to Matthew Perry's estate? Some conservative numbers I saw were that he made almost $120 million from his role as Chandler on Friends. And while not everybody has that kind of money, and he may have spent some of it on his demons and his addiction over the years, there's probably a good chunk of money left, and the question is, what do we do with his estate? And so when we confront somebody's estate, no matter who they are, celebrity or not, the first question we have to ask is whether they had an estate plan or not. So in the case of Matthew Perry, let's hope that he had an estate plan. And in a situation where someone has as much money as he did or as much earnings as he would continue to have from syndication of Friends, we want to have an estate plan and possibly a trust-based estate plan to make sure we're protecting those assets. So those basic documents in the estate plan that we're looking for are going to be, first of all, a will. So the will says what happens to your things after you're gone. So we're distributing your assets, we're distributing money to specific people in your family. If you have children under the age of 18, we want to specify a guardian, we want to specify a trustee to manage money for them. But in the case of Matthew Perry, let's hope he had a trust. So a trust can be set up while you're alive and can be used to manage your funds and manage your assets while you're alive. And so here we may have to wonder, was there a trust set up? And if that trust was set up, was it managing money for Matthew? And hopefully it was, because the trust will normally keep those assets out of probate court. Now, we've seen with lots of high-profile deaths recently, for example, Lisa Marie Presley, when we end up in probate court, those filings start out as public. So while they may get sealed at a later date, you will see many celebrities use either a trust or use some kind of LLC or corporate entity to hold most of their earnings so that they can keep their private affairs, their private financials out of that local probate court. So we don't know yet with Matthew Perry whether or not he had a will or a trust, but looking at his situation, it would have been a good idea. Now, another reason you may have created a trust in this situation is if you have a child or a family member with some kind of addiction problem. Obviously, Matthew Perry had a few demons that he was working through. One thing you can do is actually create a trust and have somebody manage the money for that family member so that you're not just giving them all kinds of money that they can go and spend on alcohol and drugs. You can actually have some restrictions, have some guidelines to make sure you're protecting that family member with addiction. Now, this is something that will hopefully be covered a bit in the news as we go forward, and if he does have a trust, chances are his trust wasn't set up to keep him from accessing his own money. But if you do have a family member with addiction or is in recovery and you have concerns about their spending, you want to make sure you consider whether a trust is going to work for you as a good way to help protect them from their demons. Now, the second part of the question is, if he didn't have an estate plan, what do we do? And that is when this all gets pretty messy. So if you die without a will, we call that dying intestate. Intestate means that now we have to submit all of your assets, all of your liabilities, everything to your local probate court. In California, the filing fees can be pretty expensive, and with an estate the size of Matthew Perry's, which could be millions and millions of dollars, on top of the probate court issues, we may also have estate tax issues from both the state or the federal government. So these are those reasons that we want to make sure that we're at least consulting with an attorney when we create an estate plan. We want to know what are the best options for us, how do we protect our legacy. If we have a significant amount of money involved in the estate, and now you may not think you have a lot of money involved. However, if you have life insurance policies, if you have significant life insurance policies, you may actually create an estate tax problem if you don't have them properly planned for with your beneficiary. Now, actors and celebrities also do often have life insurance policies on their life because they're acting in different shows, and the producers need to make sure that these shows can be made. So in the case of Matthew Perry, if he did have life insurance policies, we'd want to make sure that they are properly planned for and they have the proper beneficiaries on it. Because if not, what we've left is possibly millions of dollars going through a probate estate, and the probate court's going to have to unwind everything. I don't believe we have direct family members aside from his parents. So luckily with the parents alive, we have somebody to take over. But when you have somebody who is single, who's not married like Matthew Perry was, we need to be concerned about how our assets are going to be distributed after we're gone. And we've seen here in Minnesota a lot of these problems with Prince's estate, which appears to be finally settled. But again, in that situation, Prince was worth millions. There was estate tax problems. There was actually the federal government in court trying to challenge the amount of the estate because they were clearly getting estate taxes on Prince's estate. So when you have, whether you have a lot of money or not, these are concerns that we have about not having an estate plan. And what we want to do is make sure we have that estate plan set up because it's a pretty straightforward process. And that's the main lesson we can learn from Matthew Perry's estate. Whether he has a will or not, whether you're a celebrity or not, whether you're worth millions of dollars or you just have $5 in the bank but you have a couple of kids, it's important that we have an estate plan. And that estate plan can at least put some guidelines and some posts in the ground for where your estate should be distributed and how we're going to handle things after you're gone. I usually have 5 basic questions that I like my clients to answer before we get started working together. Number 1, who's going to care for your children if they're under 18? Number 2, who's going to manage that money for your children if they need help? So similar to somebody who's got addiction problems, do we need money management for our children or the people inheriting our estate? Number 3, who's going to be the person to manage the distribution of your estate? Depending what state you live in, it's usually called either an executor or a personal representative. Question 4, who should be receiving the distributions from your estate? This can be important if you have a child with special needs or a family member with special needs who's getting government benefits, and we want to make sure we do the proper planning so we don't endanger their government benefits. And number 5, if you have them, who's going to take care of your pets? Your pets are part of your family, and even though the law treats them as a piece of property, we want to make sure that we have a plan for our pets so they're not just sent to a shelter after we're gone. So we're waiting to see what happens with Matthew Perry's estate. I don't have more answers yet because we don't know whether there was a will or not. And frankly, if he had a trust-based plan, we may never know. This could all be handled privately, and that's frankly the best case scenario. And hopefully he had a trust that was designed with what he really wanted to have happen to his estate after he was gone. If you have more questions about estate planning, if you're ready to get started or update the estate plan you've had for years, you can go to my website, andrewmayers.com. On the front page, there's a red legal strategy session button. If you click that, you can be taken to my personal calendar. We set up a legal strategy session. It's about a 15 or 20 minute phone call. We can talk, get to know each other, and figure out what your goals are and give you some next best steps. If you like this video, you can hit the thumbs up or like button below. You can subscribe on YouTube and stay tuned so we can find out what happens next with the estate of Matthew Perry.